One. Today is Tuesday, May 7th, and we welcome everyone to our work session. Also, happy Teacher and Staff Appreciation Week to all of our staff and our teachers. And at this time, we'd also like to say welcome to our new Communications Director, Amy Matizik.
Thank you.
And to our incoming superintendent, Dr. Stacy Dattery. At this time, Ms. Schenk, will you take the call?
I will. Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Norris.
Here.
Mr. Schwartz.
Here.
Ms. Upchurch.
Here.
And I'm Patty Schenk. Here.
All right, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, well, I'm glad we're not getting blown away this morning. So, but we do have a full agenda with only these 3 items that will blow us away. So we're going to jump right in and get started because we have till 11 o'clock and several of these priorities will take us through till then. So let's see if we can get through these. We'll start with priority 1, safe and healthy schools and youth mental health. And so this was started to be led by 2 of our board members to have this discussion, Mr. Ron Schwartz. And I'd also like to welcome former board member Teresa Phillips is with us today as well. So with that, let's jump right on in. And Ms. Wetstein?
To pass it over to Mr. Frampton to kick this one off.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to hand this off relatively quickly. We're going to talk a little bit about, we have some students here on the panel that you'll notice sitting to my right. We might talk a little bit about student survey results if we have a few minutes, and we also have an annual discipline report that we present every May, so that's what you're going to be seeing today. To my right, we have Kinsey McLeod. Wave Kinsey, junior at Palmer Ridge, Iris Jones, Emma Johnson, sophomore at Lewis Palmer High School, Riley Watts, Miss Erica Nash, who's a counselor at Lewis Palmer High School, Tia Fisco, sitting right to my right, is a Palmer Ridge High School counselor. And to join us today to talk a little bit about the climate. We can sit here and talk about survey results and numbers, but I figured there's nothing better than just having our students talk about how things are going and what does the climate of our schools feel like. We've prompted them to answer 3 questions this morning, the first of which is describe the supports available to you at school. What do you feel is working well to support students, both academically and socially? And what do you feel needs to improve to support students academically and socially? So I'm going to hand this over to you all. And I think the best way to start this process is just, I would like to start with the 4 students. I'll just start with you, Kinsey, on some thoughts on the first question, and then we'll just work down the line, and I might interject or ask any questions. Of course, board, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to chime in as well. So, Kinsey, up for start with the first question on describe the supports available at school.
I'd say the supports we have available at our school is we have a bunch of tutor and mentorship programs, and we have very loving and supporting counselors, and everyone at our school is very sweet, like any of our staff, all of our teachers, and they really help you a lot anytime you need it. So.
I agree with Kinsey, especially in the counselor realm. I know that my counselor has been there for me when I've needed her academically and emotionally. And then I also think that we do a good job with the mentor programs. We have one that's specifically with upperclassmen who are mentoring young underclassmen, specifically freshmen. And I think that's really important to just build a culture of leaders in the upperclassmen area, but then also just making sure the freshmen feel included and they know what is available at their school that upperclassmen can tell them about. I also think that we do a good job with creating a culture of like inclusion, and our counselors are definitely a good resource, I think.
In a previous conversation, you talked a little bit about Friends of Rachel and RAD. Would you be willing to just share a little bit about what those programs are and how they're impacting you specifically and maybe your peers?
So RAD is a program that was started after a student, I don't remember what year, but he got in a drunk driving accident and he passed away. And his parents started it so that kids would have a resource to go to after games or just any Friday really to have something to do rather than going to a party and drinking. And so basically it's held at the YMCA, and I believe it's very inclusive. You get to upperclassmen can get to know underclassmen there, and there's a lot of people that end up going. There's free food, and it's always fun. They always have tons of activities, so it's always a blast to go and kind of know new people and not go and do anything that teenagers shouldn't be doing. So.
Excellent. Just on estimate, how many students do you think would attend on any given evening? Are we talking 10, 20, 50, 100?
I'd say it depends. So if we have like an LP versus PR game, I'd say that's like our most attendance. There's probably around like 40 people, maybe more. And then on just a normal night, there's probably like 35, 40. It still gets pretty high, so there's still quite a bit of people that go.
Good. And Friends of Rachel?
Yeah, Friends of Rachel is a very like positive club. They center around promoting positive messaging. We do like chalk writing on the bridge that we have at PR. So just positive messaging, just really lifting spirits of students, especially during like finals week. They pass out little papers with mints on them with a positive messaging. So it's definitely a really good club that we have that just helps lift the spirit of students and help people know that they're not alone.
Great. Thank you.
Rick, I
Emma,
have a
do you want to touch on Lewis Palmer High School a little bit?
Wait, I have a question.
Oh.
How often does RAD meet again?
It depends on when RAD members can go and when the advisor can go to it too, but it's usually after, the most they have it is every Friday. Usually during football season, there's a lot more RAD events, but they try to have it like once a month on a Friday.
It's a good club.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, so at Lewis Palmer, we have a couple of different things. For me, it's been mostly our school counselors, our social worker, Miss L, and then also trusted teachers. So I've gone to different coaches, teachers that I've just really connected with that I would consider a trusted teacher. And I know that they are always available. As far as academically, we also have like the tutoring center if students are struggling.
Excellent. Thank you. And Riley, you want to chime in on some things that have been working for you?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Emma has said. We also have Sources of Strength, which is just a peer-based club where we all meet and we talk about how we can advocate for suicide prevention and mental health within our school. And it's really fun. We set up campaigns at lunch, and we have a really good turnout usually. A lot of students come up and they write messages to mentors, to positive friends. And yeah, so Sources of Strength has been a very awesome support for me because I can go and talk to my peers, and we can all connect and just talk.
Great. Thank you. And Ms. Nash, do you want to touch on your thoughts on what you feel is working well to support students both academically and socially?
Yeah. So at LPHS, one of our biggest priorities is the relationships that staff intentionally build with students so that every student has like a safe, trusted adult that they can go to if they need any kind of personal support. that's something that we are always like very intentionally working on and trying to get people cognizant of. So I mean, that's just like a very like basic level of support, but our Sources of Strength program is really cool because the campaigns that Riley mentioned that we do are for everybody. So we try to get every student able to come participate in whatever we're focusing on for that specific campaign. One of the really cool things we did this year too was Sources started putting together these flyers to go into the bathrooms. So every bathroom stall has like this flyer with like, here's a, calming exercise. Here's contact information for all the counselors and the social worker. You can send them an email. Because we found out it came about because somebody came forward and said there's always kids in the bathroom who are having a hard time. And for whatever reason, they don't want to go to an adult. And so we're like, well, what can we do to help students in that moment? So that came about, and we change them every month, which is super cool. The kids love going and changing them out for us. Yeah. Yeah, so it's really like the culture. Like we try to make the culture just very supportive, very safe and welcoming for every student so that we want them to know what to do. And the Sources program, one more thing with that is that we, one of the main ideas behind it is teaching the Sources peer leaders to be connectors to help for students, friends they have who are struggling. Like, okay, this is beyond the scope of what I can do as a friend, so how do I get them connected with an adult that can help them with the resources that maybe they need? Yeah, so that's really good too.
Yeah. So I had a question. I think Emma brought it up, and then it was just reiterated. So this whole term and idea of a trusted adult, we keep hearing that time and time again, and clearly it's important, right? And in most scenarios, moms and dads are also trusted adults. But in the school system, what do the trusted adults look and act like? Right? What behavior is valuable to the students from those trusted adults?
Yeah, I think it's someone that you can they really connect with you. They get to know you on a very deep and personal level, which not every teacher does. And so like Ms. Nash was saying, we're trying to build that more personal connection with teachers, but that's not always the case. You're going to relate more to some teachers than others. You also mentioned parents. Well, some kids go to school to get away from their homes, and so having those trusted adults that you just connect with, you can talk to, they're always there for you. They'll put down whatever grading they have to just chat with you and just be there for you on a more personal level than just academically and at the school.
So just to ask a next level of depth on that, to make sure that we're understanding, we're trying to help drive things that are successful for the students. It sounds like in between the lines you were saying listening skills, but I just want to make sure that I'm not misinterpreting that.
Yeah, being heard is such a big thing because you can walk into a classroom and the teacher will go and ask everyone how their weekend was, but it's a matter of going deeper, asking follow-up questions. If I say, yeah, my weekend was, I went camping. Well, tell me about that. How was your camping trip? Just some of those, getting to know you on a deeper level and listening.
Thank you. Iris, I'm going to ask you a quick question because we just heard from Ms. Nash about Sources at Lewis Palmer High School. In our conversation last week, you mentioned some work that you're doing at Palmer Ridge on that same topic. Would you like to share a little bit about where you're at and what your goals and visions are for that program?
Sure. So this year, after seeing kind of LP and how impactful Sources of Strength has been there, I really wanted to kind of get Sources of Strength started back up at PR because it kind of died out, I think, after somebody graduated. That was kind of heading it before. And so we're working to get a training because, as you know, you have to get the teachers trained as well as students, but the teachers have to be trained first. So figuring the logistics out with that has been kind of complicated. But I think this summer we're working to get a training going with that. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that works out, even though I'm graduating, but I'll keep up with it to hopefully do that.
And in her humility, it sounds like Irish is taking the lead in getting this done at Palmer Ridge High School. So we appreciate all your efforts there. Ms. Fisco, back to you. What do you feel is working well to support students academically and socially?
I think we do have a lot of teachers that are good at also making those relationships with students and making sure to be there for them. Another thing we've been doing at Palmer Ridge when students are out for a while, for if it's like they've been hospitalized or had a family tragedy or a death in the family, when they come back, we've been doing what we call like a return to learn plan, so we can advocate for them to get those academic supports as they transition back into the school setting, so that it's not, you know, now you have all this stuff you have to get caught up on. And I think that that's been helpful for those that's affected. And then just being there when they need us. We do have QR codes around the building that students can scan if they want to come see us, and then we can call them in. I think that's been helpful. I
Do you
hope.
agree? It's been helpful? You know,
Ish.
okay, yeah. So need to keep offering these different opportunities and different ways to make sure everybody's aware of what's available. Okay. Before we go on to the last question, does anybody have additional thoughts on what's working well to support students? Yeah.
Yeah, so we also have what we call the Ranger Connection Crew. And so this is a club for incoming freshmen where you have sophomore, well, I guess you have freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. It's a big mix of people who just make sure the incoming freshmen feel welcomed and heard and not so alone. And so, you know, ideally we connect with them and we keep talking to them throughout the year, keep checking in, make sure that they're doing okay throughout their freshman year, even just as a new student, because we know how difficult that can be. And so we want to make sure that they have peers on their side. We'll also like invite them to sports events. We have a freshman tailgate at the beginning of the year, and so we just kind of make the transition smoother for them.
Wonderful. One thing Ms. O'Connor's mentioned to me many times that she's really proud of is the Snacks and Solutions opportunity. Could one of the three of you talk specifically about what that looks like and how that works at Lewis Palmer High School?
Okay. So yeah, the Snacks and Solutions is something where you can, it's during both your lunches, and so you can go during your lunch, and basically it's just, here is a problem, what are your ideas for this solution? And so it just really makes sure that the students' voices are being heard, and there's a really good turnout a lot of the days. And everyone has a voice, and so it's really important. And I love having Ms. O'Connor who wants to hear our voices and having that opportunity to speak our mind.
What I'm really wanting to know is, are the good snacks?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Honestly, I mean, it's what gets people there too.
Okay. It always works. It always works. Okay, thank you for that. Last question. What do you feel needs to improve to support students academically and socially? So if you were in charge of the world, a principal for a day, or whatever control you have, what kind of things would you do differently to improve how students are supported? I'll start with you, Kinsey.
To be honest, this is kind of a hard question to answer because Palmer Ridge is a very good school. Like, I've been to a lot of not so great schools, so coming to the school, it was really great. Answering this is quite hard because if I was principal, I don't even know what I'd do. I'd probably take a big nap in Dr. Frank's office. It's pretty nice. But academically, I'd say a few of our teachers sometimes could be quite not so open, and it's kind of hard to talk to teachers about, like, if you're having a bad grade, it's hard to talk to them about your bad grade when you don't feel connected with them. So when they aren't allowing you to have like a relationship with them or talk to them, or it just feels quite hard to kind of bond with them, it makes it kind of hard to increase your grades or to fix a test or anything like that. And socially, I'd say, I don't know, we have a lot of good programs that helps get every class like together, but I'd say as a whole, probably making a lot of our upperclassmen think they're a lot better than underclassmen, so there's not really much you guys can do about that because that's just teenagers, but so I'm not really sure socially what we could do about that, but I just know that upperclassmen do quite think they're better than underclassmen.
Well, as a junior, you've probably been in that seat and have some compassion for what the underclassmen are feeling, so
Yeah.
that makes sense. Iris, do you want to add anything?
I guess I'm kind of biased, but I really want to see Sources of Strength started up just because I know how big of an impact it's had at LP with creating community. And like Kenzie's saying, if upperclassmen are feeling like they're better than underclassmen, I just want to see everybody come together a little more and normalize the conversation of mental health at PR. And just, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yep, question.
So Iris, can I ask a question about what does normalize look like?
I think normalize would mean just talking about it more in general. I feel like we talk about it some at PR, but not nearly enough.
Does it mean making talking about it acceptable?
Yes, I think so.
Thank you.
Emma, you're up.
So I kind of came up with a couple of different things. For me, I had a really rough freshman year as far as teachers. I had a really hard time connecting with any of my teachers, but there was also kind of this feeling of not being able to connect with them on a human level, in the sense where, you know, it's kind of the joke around where it's like teachers are humans too, you know, but it's true, like there's this lack of connection. One thing that had happened to me that was like, if you will, traumatizing, I had a teacher just walk past me while I was crying in the hallway. And that was something where I decided that no teacher cared. And I had to find maybe just one or two teachers that I knew genuinely cared. And I did. But having this personal connection with teachers is so important, and stopping to talk to that student could potentially save their life. And I think that there just needs to be more connection. And then another thing that I thought about was the homework and the pressure that's put on students. For example, the other night, I got a text from a friend at 1 a.m. asking me to read her essay that she just wrote. And students are so worn out and tired, and there's this unrealistic expectation put on them to, you know, do their homework for all of their classes, still get good grades, then sleep and be ready to go the next morning, and then to go to their sports, to work, to anything else. And it's just an unrealistic pressure. Teachers in the high schools have 90-minute classes. And as a student, I feel like that's enough time to get whatever you need done, including an assignment, but then also get rid of any just busy work because you're trying to waste time. So it's like, here, we'll do some busy work, but then here's your homework that I want you to do tonight. I have a brother who has really bad ADHD, and he's in middle school, and so doing homework at home without this school structure is so hard for him. And so he has to try and figure out his learning plan where he's not getting as much homework because he stresses out like really bad. And so I feel like so many students experience that as well.
Emma, I really appreciate that. One of the things that I think is important for us to acknowledge, and the reason we're asking the questions the way we are, is there is absolutely a connection between the academic and social impacts that students have to endure on a daily basis. And so the reason we're asking the question about both the academic and the social piece is to be very intentional about connecting those dots and the impact that academic pressures have on students and the social and mental health impacts that the academic pressures can have. So I really appreciate you elevating that and bringing that up, because I think that's essential for our board to hear on how those two things are interconnected. So Riley, do you want to add anything to the last question? What do you feel needs to improve to support students academically and socially?
Yeah, so sometimes being a student, I feel that there's a lack of knowledge, kind of an apathy towards mental health, and I feel like a lot of students take it as a joke, like they just joke about suicide, and honestly, like it's just not funny to people that have been affected by it. And so at Sources of Strength, like we really try to break that stigma. We really try to make it known that it's not funny to joke about that stuff. So for me, it's just kind of changing the way we talk about suicide and the way that we talk about mental health, so that students are aware that it does affect other people, and it may be funny to them, but it's not funny to the other person. So yeah, and I also like how during study hall we have different organizations come in and talk about it, and so I feel like that's helped a lot with the student body, just to make them more aware of the fact that suicide is very prevalent in our community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Ms. Nash, what are your thoughts from the counseling perspective on how we can improve supports for students?
I think that Emma touched on it really well. I think sometimes I've seen cases like teachers want students to learn their content, right? And it's amazing and it's valuable and it's relevant, but I think sometimes staff can lose the big picture of everything that students have going on, okay? It's like you have a paper in this class, you have like this huge midterm in this class, and it's like all of it is so much that, especially when you're taking into consideration all the other things that students are doing outside of school, because we talk to students all the time about the importance of being well-rounded, you know, like who you are as a human being, and especially when you're looking at colleges or internships or whatever you're gonna do next. There's so much more to you that they're going to be looking at. So students are looking at extracurriculars, sports, jobs, volunteer activities. It's a lot. Like we ask a lot of these students to stay on top of. And when that gets to be out of balance, burnout is very, very real. And that's where the mental health piece can kind of go off the deep end. Like I've worked with some very, very driven students taking, you know, several AP classes and like doing all the things. And like I've unfortunately had a couple of situations where they reached this breaking point and they're on a completely different trajectory than they were before, just because of everything compounding on each other. So I think one of the biggest things that we can continue to work on as a school is just the awareness of what it's like to be a teenager right now, and how the things that each teacher is giving them, how does that all fit together in helping make sure we're raising happy, healthy young people?
I appreciate that. One of the things I like to highlight is, to your point, Ms. Nash, is that if I were to go around this room, and I'm not going to do this because we're running out of time, but if I were to go around this room and ask every person here who graduated from high school what's one memory they have of high school, I guarantee you no one in here is going to say the wonderful learning of photosynthesis in biology. It's just not going to happen.
Ms. Phillips would have done
Okay, so there might be one exception. But to that point, we all go a different direction. I agree, the learning is absolutely essential, and that's our purpose. But when we think back to high school and experiences, it's that well-rounded, balanced approach that is essential to our memories of our fond memories of high school. It might be a Friday night football game, or a homecoming dance, or success on the theater, on the stage, musically. So there's so many other things about what we do that are essential to the mental health and wellness of students that go way beyond the classroom. And if we're not conscious of the impact that the classroom can have on prohibiting access to those things because of the pressures to get that work done, we could actually be counterproductive as well. So we do definitely need to strike that balance. Ms. Fisco, I'm going to wrap it up with you on the last question.
Okay. I think similar to what Iris had said, if we can make it more of a normalized conversation that mental health matters for students and for staff to be maybe more trained or more knowledgeable in that. So I think a lot of our teachers, they're great, but I don't know if they really realize how much that can affect the student and in turn their grades and their trajectory beyond high school. So if there could be maybe more of that implemented in the classroom for them to do, or how to approach a student if they do see them crying in the hallway, because that's important for them to acknowledge that, I think. And for students, if we maybe had more lessons about mental health topics, or implementing sources of strength at Palmer Ridge, and I don't know if we did more maybe events around mental health awareness and make it more of a part of our school culture, I think that would be really good to try to implement.
Great. Which is a great segue into the next piece. One of the things in a meeting I had with Mr. Schwartz and Ms. Phillips is, okay, let's not just talk about it, let's do something about it. What's the ask? So one of the things that we're thinking about doing here is, one of the things I would like to consider pursuing. Brett, could you help me forward that? I'm having clicker issues. We have a resource that's available to us in our community called Youth Mental Health First Aid. One of the things that, when Emma was talking about the story of a teacher not interacting during a tough time and the impact that had, one of the things that I would like to propose is that we have youth mental health first aid for all staff that are interfacing with students grades 5 through 12. Because my guess is, and I don't know the circumstances with that instance that you were talking about, but my guess is that we have some teachers in our buildings who don't know what to do when there's a student who is struggling with some social concerns. And I think that's essential for us to have all of our staff have some awareness on what to look for, what to do when they see some high risk concerns, and also have really solid references and referral options for students whose needs go beyond just some first aid level skills that our teachers need. So that's one of the things I'm coming to you board with today is to initiate this conversation to see what we need to do logistically and financially to get youth mental health first aid for all of our staff. We are looking at grades 5 through 12 because one of the things I've heard very clearly from our principals is that starting in high school is too late. Our middle school staff need to be fully aware of this, and even our elementary teachers, grades 5 and 6, really need to start dipping their toe into the water, being aware of the training that exists. Now, obviously, for teachers in grades K through 4, this would be an optional and available training for them as well, but I'm talking about all staff and not just licensed staff. I think there's opportunities for our classified staff to also really benefit from the youth mental health first aid training. Do any of you have experience with that and want to talk a little bit about youth mental health first aid?
Yeah, so the Pikes Peak Suicide Prevention Teen Board recently went through the Teen Mental Health First Aid Training, which is working teen to teen, and how we can help the teen get to an adult to get help. And it was a very insightful training. And from what I've heard, the youth mental health first aid is very similar, but it is the adult's next step, maybe once a teen brings them to an adult. And I think that it would be very eye-opening for a lot of teachers and adults to have. I think even I would encourage my parents, because it is something where if they are the trusted adult in that situation, they need to know what to do and how to help that teen.
Yep. I got some really advanced students here who jump right to bullet 4, you may notice.
Oh.
Yeah, you see how you do that? You're already a step ahead. So 2 things that you brought up that I want to discuss a little bit further. The first of which is if we have a certain percentage of our staff trained in youth mental health first aid, that opens the door for us to have teen mental health first aid presented in our schools. And the reason it's essential for the staff to be trained first is exactly what Emma just said. If a teen is trained, but we don't have the adults on board, there's no one to refer the students to. And so it's not as effective for the teens to be trained without having the staff trained. And there's a minimum threshold of staff that we need to have trained, and it's a fairly big number. So again, that's why I'm looking at the all-staff piece, so we can have those supports and open that door to train teams if they're interested in receiving that training. I don't think we would talk about making that required for anybody. It would just be available. And then the second thing Emma talked about is the parents and community. One thing about youth mental health first aid is it's not designed, it's not a curriculum that we teach in schools. It's not something that's unique and specific to our school staff. It would be good for anybody in the community, including parents and community. And one of the things that Mr. Schwartz talked about in our conversation is we can't be the sole solution to mental health problems in our community. And when I say we, the schools can't be the sole solution to mental health. It's much bigger than what schools can impact. And we need help. We need help from our community partners. We need help from our families and our parents. In order to be effective in addressing mental health concerns, we need to collectively tackle this as a community. And youth mental health first aid is absolutely designed just for that purpose, and it's very specific intention. Do you want to expand on that at all?
Well, I was going to say no, but any chance to get in front of the mic is wonderful. Thank you. The thing we really talked about also is the staff, meaning the teachers and the other folks in the building that work with the students, don't have infinite capacity. Right? There are limits to what human beings can do, and they still have an academic job as well. And the primary reason we have schools is academics, right? And so how do we make this the art of an and versus an or? And the answer was, we see if there's some other tools available that don't put all the weight on the teaching staff, right? And the other thing is a little reality check, right? There isn't one ultimate solution to this challenge because it's a set of individuals that are in dynamics or groups that have unique dynamics. And so likely this will continue to fester in our society for quite a while. So our job is to try to minimize it so that we can maximize the students' joy and efficacy or productivity when they're in our buildings, whether they're doing curricular or extracurricular activities. Right? So our whole goal here is to make it a positive experience when you're in the buildings, and the hours that you're there, have you get more out of it, and our staff. And that is a Herculean challenge, but it's not unsurmountable.
Thanks, Ron. To that end, one of the things, and those of you who've been around me for a while have probably heard me say this, but I'm going to repeat it because I believe in it so much, and I think the students today have really emphasized the point. Mental health isn't a place that you go get help. Obviously, we have two highly trained counselors sitting in this room today, and they have their place in school. But this isn't just a location where if you're having a bad day or you're having a mental health concern, you go there and they fix it for you. It's a culture, it's a training of all of our staff in our schools, so a teacher is aware of that in their classroom. A teacher is well trained, they know what to look for, they know what to do if they see concerns, they know what questions to ask to support students. Back in the 80s, when I was a high school student, we had a computer class. And if you happen to get lucky enough to take the computer class, you have access to a computer. And it was for that very short period of time. It was, 40 minutes a day, one semester in 4 years. And I'm using that as a comparison to mental health. Because right now I still feel like mental health is like that computer class where we have access to it and you can go get it if you would like. But computers today are pervasive. They're in our hands constantly. It's not even a set-aside class anymore. It's part of who we are. It's part of what we do. It's part of the fabric of academics. I want mental health to be the same way, where it's not just a place, it's not just a class, but it's part of the fabric of our community. And I believe that youth mental health first aid is the first step in that direction, or another step, because I think we've taken many steps, but it's another step in that direction. So I'm going to be working with the Pikes Peak Suicide Prevention Organization. They do a lot of trainings. They're very good at this. They've infused themselves into multiple school districts in the Southern Colorado region, and I would like to work very closely with them. And I suspect in a future meeting you will be hearing more about the specifics on what this can look like and the launch. The purpose of today was to give you an opportunity to hear how things are going in our schools and to get a first taste of a solution that we're proposing, knowing that in a future meeting you will see more specifics and have opportunities to dive into the actual content of the youth mental health first aid so you know exactly what we're talking about. Are there any questions from the board before we release our student panel here?
Board, any questions? I anticipate us continuing this conversation because I want to be mindful of our time, but I did have a couple quick questions, and I don't know if this is going to be Mr. Frampton or a student panel. I also first want to say thank you all for coming and sharing and being very candid with your responses and your thoughts, and also congratulations on our graduating senior with our panel. My question centers around this youth mental health first aid. With how much in a day and in a week, and when we talk about the overload, where would this fit in the training? That's something, you don't have to answer it now, but something to think about as you're visiting that. As a parent, and I've said this many times over the last 6 years, my why on why I ran for the board in the first place was I saw the difference when you have that relationship and that partnership between your parents and your staff and your student. And I witnessed firsthand my own student when he was in high school and how impactful when there was just a teacher that was not one of his teachers that was his safe teacher, but just a teacher that leaned in and recognized that here's a student that could use some help. And that made the difference and literally saved my own child's life. So I'm very grateful for our staff that lean in, and I'm very grateful for you being candid with that. And I also have seen the impact of when there's not that partnership between staff and parents. So I just want to make sure that when we're going through this, I think partnering with parents and the families and our staff is also key too.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Church. If we make something mandatory, obviously we need to do it on the clock with our teachers, and they need to do it at a time in which they're already here and they're being paid for it. I think, Ron, you used the word Herculean efforts. I think the logistics of this are going to be enormous and very difficult. And I suspect we might need to add extra time in order to get this in, which is extra dollars. So that's part of the reason we're engaging in this conversation. I'm not prepared to talk about those logistics today or the specifics of costs, but I want to plant that seed for future conversation. But that's going to be the most difficult part of this. Okay. Any other questions? Before we release this group, I just want to take the opportunity to present you the 23-24 school year discipline data. Some of you may know that it's policy that you receive this data on an annual basis, so I want to make sure that we have the opportunity for you to see that data. Here it is for the 23-24 school year, broken down by school, and I just want to give you an opportunity to take a peek at that and ask any questions if you have any. Okay.
Go ahead. Mr. Schwartz?
I'll go right after Ms. Shank.
Ms. Shank?
What's the difference between the first and the second column?
That was my question.
We might have some students who have been suspended more than one time. And so if you see a bigger number on the right, it oftentimes would indicate, so for Bear Creek, it would indicate that we've had at least one student suspended twice.
So my question was, how does this relate to the previous 3 to 5 years? Because I know, Mr. Frampton, you've initiated some new concept in terms of how to attempt to address certain issues that may or may not require discipline, and I'm curious as to the results of those.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, when you use the word 5 years, we have COVID that inserted itself, and that made all of our numbers wonky. We've seen a substantial drop from pre-COVID as far as our discipline. However, we saw a slight uptick in the 23-24 school year, and I need to spend some time digging a little bit deeper into the data to get to the why. I want to work with our principals to get a better understanding of the why. We've seen an uptick, but we've seen about a 30% uptick in the number of students suspended for the school year, and that's, I wouldn't use the word concerning, but it's something that's got our attention, and I would like to spend a little bit more time trying to figure out what's behind that, if there's a root cause analysis that we can put in place. Discipline in and of itself, one of the RPIs that we're going to talk about in a future meeting isn't to remove discipline from schools, because discipline has its place. So our goal won't be to have 0 suspensions, because it is a powerful tool in helping educate students. However, what we need to be very thoughtful about is the learning and the intentionality behind suspension, so it gives students an opportunity to recover both academically and socially from whatever the incident was, and help them reduce the chances of engaging in that behavior that led to suspension in the first place. I mean, so it has its place. Our goal isn't to have 0, but our goal is to have intention behind it to reduce the recidivism rate of suspensions. Does that make sense?
So quick follow-up question. If the board concurs, can we make sure that we get on each other's calendar to get the results of your inquiry sometime in the near future?
Yes.
And second thing is to make sure we understand the relevance of the roughly 30% increase. Our student count has been relatively flat over that window, right?
Yep.
So there is, it's noteworthy is the point.
It is. Absolutely it is. And one final point I'd like to make that's actually will emphasize what we're talking about. We have the Vape Educate program that's been brought into the district, and Dr. Frank was really instrumental in helping bring that into the district. And that's a perfect example of what we're talking about. Prior to the Vape Educate program coming into Lewis Palmer School District, we would just suspend students who had a vape violation in schools, and it was often a multi-day suspension. Now there's an opportunity for a student who has that infraction to reduce their suspension from 3 down to 1 and attend this class and receive some education. So there's still a consequence, but there's also an opportunity to reduce that consequence down, have some education, and that program has been accessed quite frequently, both last year and this year. And the last piece of the policy that I need to talk to you about is the total number of expulsions. We've had 7 expulsions this year, And I'll answer your question preemptively. That's exactly the same as what we had last year, so we have not seen an uptick in the actual expulsions. The vast majority are in our secondary schools. I think all of them are in our secondary schools. None of our expulsions have gone to a formal hearing, and 6 were offered a deferred option, which is something that's unique in Lewis Palmer School District, where we offer students who are potentially in the expulsion consideration to sign an agreement that brings them back to school quickly, and then a second violation or a violation of that agreement would lead to a more formal expulsion. So 6 of the 7 have had that option this year. Okay. I know I've taken way more time, so I apologize, and I also need to let this panel get back to school. Yes. So thank you.
Well, again, thank you so much for your presentation. And again, thank you for joining us and taking time from school. And
Thank you,
final,
students.
Yep. Thank you very much.
thank you. And your principals are here with you, so I'm pretty sure your absences are excused. Okay, moving right along, we're going to push right through to B2, Priority 6, as it relates to relationships and communications. We're going to do some committee updates, and if we can keep our updates to for each committee to about 10 to 15 minutes. I know that there's a lot of really good information to cover, but let's see if we can keep that narrowed down. But I'd like to welcome our panelists from our different committees. And Ms. Wetstein, where would you like us to start?
I will start by asking Mr. Ridgway to pull up the presentation. That's the correct one. Thank you. And we'll just start by orienting with our committee work. And I'm happy, there it is, to click along. Here we go. So our intention this morning is to provide the board an update on some of the ongoing work of our many committees. We are so proud of the work of our community who is very engaged in supporting us with our improvement efforts. So we have several committee updates this morning led by our community members. First, I'll introduce Ms. Amber Newberry, who is here to present some of the ongoing work of the consent curriculum working group. So for board members who are new, we were approached by Ms. Newberry about 2 years ago, maybe a little more than 2 years ago at this point, with an offer to support us with helping our students know about personal boundaries and safety and the importance of understanding consent. And since that time, we initiated a task force of students, staff, and community members who worked on recommendations to the Board of Education, one of which was to develop curriculum that would be presented to our students. So Ms. Newberry is here this morning to give you an update on how that work is going. And I'll let you click along if you'd like to.
All right, hi. Actually, it started in 2020 was when I had coffee with Ms. Teresa over there to start talking about consent and the way we were teaching it in our schools. I am a mental health counselor here in town. I also have students who I have a sophomore and a freshman at LP. I have an 8th grader at LPMS, and then I also have a 6th grader at Palmer Lake Elementary. So I have all these age kids right now, which I actually think has been the best part of this whole thing. We began the conversation. I presented to principals and counselors. The first principal to talk to me was Bridget, and she came and asked me to do a lunch and learn for her students. We did that. It went really well. She then asked me to come present to the freshmen during their study hall sessions, and then the sophomores. That went really well. And then Mr. O'Connor from the middle school asked me to come present to PE. I did that. That went really well. I came and did a Powerful Parents Academy in April, and that is where the consent task force kind of came about. We met all summer long. We had students, we had counselors, we had community members, we had a lot of people who had a lot of things that they wanted to see put into the schools and put into the curriculum. And so I took all of that and created a new consent curriculum for the 7th through 10th grades. I presented this year to all 7th through 10th grade students in our district. And then I met afterwards with the students and counselors to get feedback and make sure that what I was teaching was important and held value to them. That to me is the most important part, is that our students get a say-so in what they're being taught and what they need to be taught and what they find to be helpful. I try to use what I want is a communal way that we talk about consent, and so I use the same way to talk about it with all of the grades. So we talk about a consent intersection, we talk about what is a red light, what is a yellow light, what is a green light. Red light meaning you don't have consent. Yellow light also meaning you don't have consent, but it's harder to read and what that looks like if somebody is having a freeze response or somebody is too nervous to say no, those kinds of things. And then a green light and what that looks like. And we talk about fries. We talk about that consent is freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. I'm happy to say that in my lunches with all the kids, they all remembered it. So that was pretty great. I just really want us to have a cohesive way that we're talking about consent. So all of our students know what we're saying, know what we're talking about, know what's acceptable, know what's not acceptable, know how to be safe. This is the 9th to 10th grade curriculum. This is what was recommended by the task force and what was accepted by the board. I know we don't have very much time, so I'm just going to scooch by it. You guys can look at it, if you'd like to. One of the things that the teens, the 9th and 10th graders told me they really loved was the option, the scenarios that I gave. So I would give a bunch of scenarios and ask the students, is this a red light? Is this a yellow light? Is this a green light? And then if it's a red light, what is it violating in fries? And then it would open up a lot of conversation. This scenario in particular kind of blew a lot of minds. A lot of the kids have such access to one another. They thought it was perfectly acceptable to follow somebody using their Snap Map. And that was like a big conversation we ended up having with them. So the scenarios worked really well. We also talked about reporting, so helping students understand what their options were as far as reporting if they experience a violation. Again, super interesting. We talked about safe to tell when I mentioned it to the 7th and 8th graders. They didn't know how to do safe on their phone, like how to write safe. They didn't know the letters under the so it's just super interesting, the things that come up when you're with them and you're talking to them and it's a conversation with them. The 7th and 8th grade curriculum included a lot of things. It only has a few up there, but it was supposed to carry over from 6th grade curriculum, so there's a lot of information. I created 2 different presentations because when I present in the PE classes, it's a combination of both 7th and 8th graders that are together. And so my thought was we could do one presentation one year, the other presentation the other year, so they get both presentations, they get covered all of the information, and they're not bored coming back and hearing kind of the same thing over and over again. We talked a lot about peer pressure, what positive peer pressure looks like, negative peer pressure, the stress of peer pressure, and then we talked about it when it comes to your confidence, when it comes to drugs and alcohol, and then we talked about how do you deal with peer pressure, what can you do if you're feeling pressured to do something, or to avoid peer pressure if you can. Again, kids are awesome and they participate and it is a great conversation. This is the 6th grade curriculum. We did not implement or address the 6th grade curriculum this year. That is hopefully something that we will start to work on this year. The pre-K the pre-K through 5th grade curriculum has not yet been discussed. I know that they have a curriculum. It requires some going through and just talking with teachers about like the stoplight metaphor and the way that we can have that same language that is about consent that runs through all of our schools, and providing resources for teachers and parents, children's books and things like that. There was a parent guardian opt-out process for the 9th and 10th graders. For all the high school presentations I did, a total of 5 children were opted out, and a lot of the feedback was really positive from the parents. Here's what I heard from the students when I met with them. They liked the progressive learning. They liked, because the 10th graders I taught this year, I had taught as 8th graders a couple years ago. So they liked that it was progressive learning. I show a video, that's a T video. They love the T video. They liked having the SRO in the room with me. I always have the resource officer come and talk about the actual law. And also he talks about examples of things that have happened in his line of work, like students he's had to arrest and things like that, in order to really drive it home that these are important things that they need to be thinking about. I hand out candy. They like that. They like the stoplight metaphor. You can hear them talking about it in the hall. Like, you can hear kids being like, that's a red light. Like, and they're joking about it, but it's like a non-threatening way to tell somebody, hey, I don't like that. And it makes it a lot less intimidating to even hear it, because they make fun, they poke around about it. I love that they talk about it like that. My sons were like, you should pick something else. I said, what could I pick that teen boys would not completely run away with? There's nothing. They like that we talk about real world situations. They love the scenarios. They all remembered the fries. They liked the fries. They liked that it was engaging. They liked that I did group work with them. They liked that it was a conversation and I really made them participate with me. Questions they were left with, they wanted to know what you could do to protect yourself at school, like what can you bring to school with you if you feel like you need protection. They wanted to talk more about social media and consent. They wanted to talk about the way that you talk to people. So somebody making lewd comments about your body, is that a violation of your consent? What can I do if that's happening? They wanted to talk more about setting boundaries, how to say no. How to deal with unwanted messages on social media, how to deal with bullying and gossip. Can someone retaliate if they report them? The middle school asked that. In high school, we actually dive into that pretty deeply about retaliation. What did you learn? They learned about the statistics. They really appreciated having statistics in front of them. Consequences, the lights were a helpful tool, real life examples, it's okay to say no and how to say no. Some things are illegal that were surprising, again, like following people on the snap maps. We talked about domestic violence. That was also super surprising to them. Boundaries, what good relationships look like. Questions you were left with. Oh, no, we already did that. Okay. Identify for how consent is addressed in the elementary curriculum and develop a resource list for teachers. That's what's left for elementary. Create the 6th grade specific supplemental income and present it. Meet with teachers to discuss the common language of consent being used in upper grade levels so it can be implemented in lower levels, like the fries and the traffic lights. We would like to talk about creating some videos for parent review. I know that there are some parents who opted their kids out because they wanted to see what I was talking about. And while I can provide my slides, that is a 10th of the conversation, because I ask questions and they respond, and every class is different. And so maybe making some videos to help kind of drive that home for parents, some talking points for home conversations, getting the clear policies and paperwork in order to pass that information on to the students. Policies and procedures was a part of our task force, but because of new Colorado laws coming down, that has not really been implemented as of yet. And so to really have that clear for us to be able to pass that information on to the students would be great. Further refine the presentations based on their feedback, and then continue to present to students annually and gather their feedback. Do you guys have any questions? Comments, concerns?
Board, Mr. Schwartz?
First of all, thank you. This is such important work,
Oh, thank you.
right? Prevention is so valuable here. For us as a school system, what things should we be looking for so that we know it's working?
I think what you'll see is probably an increase of reports. That's my guess. And that is just because, not that it increases in happening, but it increases in people feeling empowered to do something about it. So my guess would be initially we would see an increase in reporting, followed by hopefully a drastic decrease in reporting and in events that happen. So that would be my guess. Yeah.
Any other questions? No.
Can I make a comment? I just want to thank Ms. Newberry again for all the work that she is leading along with our staff and those who committed to the task force work. We will plan to provide ongoing updates to the board so that as we continue with the curriculum development, you know where we are in the process and where we are in getting those materials out for parent review as well.
I had a couple quick questions. You'd mentioned what our opt-out rate was for our high school. What about how are we informing parents, and how are we ensuring that parents are empowered in the middle school and sixth grade as well?
Yes. So they did not send out opt-outs for the middle school, I believe, because I don't talk about sex in the middle school. I mostly talk about peer pressure and holding hands and sitting next to each other and those kinds of things. And that goes along with their PE health lectures, which I think they send out an opt-out for at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, so
it's just included in that.
It's really addressing the health and PE standards at the middle school level.
Yeah.
But I do recall as a parent getting my notifications when my children were in sixth grade, if we wanted to opt out of sixth grade. And I do remember and recall getting the notifications as parents in middle school for my students as well.
Yeah, I think it's included in the health lecture. They hand out, I think they give out something in the beginning that's of all the health lecture stuff, and it's included that will be one of the health lectures.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're still
but
partnering with our parents.
I don't know that anybody was opted out in the middle school realm.
Okay.
We can verify that
Yeah.
for you.
Okay. And then one other question. Can you give an example of positive peer pressure?
Yeah, so positive peer pressure would be like if you don't feel like you want to join a football team because it's a lot of work, but all your friends are on the football team and they convince you that it'll be good for you and that you'll get to work out and hang out with your buddies, and so you join the football team and then you end up with a positive experience. So, or somebody who put some positive peer pressure on you to do really well on an assignment that you're doing together, or somebody who adds positive peer pressure to your life and asks you to join a club with them that maybe you don't want to join, like sources of strength, but you end up really learning a lot and it becomes like something that's really important to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then one other quick question. When you said that students really responded to progressive learning, what is that?
So the way that I've been teaching has been that, like, in the 7th and 8th grade, we talk about, like, I show Disney movie clips to talk about consent, and we talk about holding hands, we talk about peer pressure for drugs and alcohol, we talk about healthy relationships on a super basic level. And then when they get to their freshman year, all of that is taken deeper. So all of that is now, it's about like more intimate relationships, and it's more about like being at a football game and being alone or those kinds of things. So we just, with their maturity level, talk more deeply about the different areas of consent. And so it's not boring. It continues to build on itself.
It builds on itself.
Yeah.
Okay. That was my questions.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments or thoughts before we say thank you, Ms. Newberry, and move forward? No, thank you so very much.
Yeah.
And thank you for your work on the task force. And we will be getting some reports coming up, as I understand it, on policy work from that task force as well. Okay,
Cool.
thank you so very much.
Yes, thank you.
Our next one, Ms. Wetstein, would you like to introduce?
Yes, I'd like to thank Dr. Brahm, Eric Purdy, and Ms. Chris Thomas. They've done some great work on the calendar task force, and we'll invite them to come up and talk about recommendations that the group has for the board.
Hi, everybody. So, there you go. So Dr. Brahm's here. I'm here. Eric had to leave for AP testing. Things were changing, so he wasn't able to stay. You can go to the next one. So the calendar committee was formed about 2 years ago following the failed MLO, and then followed that district survey that came out right after that. Then the calendar committee met and determined that we needed to figure out if that 4-day school week would work, and it didn't have overwhelming support to move forward. So the committee reconvened. We had broad representation across students, parents, staff, and staff from all levels, elementary, middle, and high school, and to determine what we want our committee to look like, or our calendar to look like going forward. The committee formulated recommendations. Each recommendation had a 70% agreement across the task force committee. There was really good structure with the process, and it was really helpful. Do you want to go to the next one? So the purpose is to provide input and recommendations into the future approach to developing an annual school year calendar. Do you want to go into?
Sure. So one of the things that we did is we worked on themes, and this is an example of some of the work that we had done. And as themes emerged in our collaboration as a group, we were all provided with, in this instance, blue dots. And so the more dots, the more prominent that was of a concern or a theme that we wanted to focus on as a committee. And here are some more examples. And this kind of drove the list that we have compiled to share with you today.
So the calendar task force recommendations recommends incorporating the proposed considerations into regulation to ICA school year school calendar instruction time. The annual calendar considerations are described in the attached document. I don't think we need to read through all of them, but some of them that had that 70% consensus were that teachers will not be required to report earlier than August 1st. The first day of school for students shall not be scheduled as late in August, or will be scheduled as late in August as possible, with the first semester typically ending before winter break. And then, do you want to hit a couple?
Sure. The first and second semester should be as balanced as possible for student instructional time, considering that this is dictated by some holidays. The first week of school for students shall not be a full 5-day week whenever possible. A two-day Friday, Monday fall break will be scheduled in October. The district will be closed the full week of Thanksgiving. High school finals should finish before winter break when possible. Winter break shall be at least 2 weeks for students. The district will not implement e-learning days on snow days. The Friday before winter break may be used as an alternative finals student contact day as needed in the first semester. The last Monday in April may be used as an alternative student contact day second semester as needed. Spring break shall be in alignment with surrounding Pikes Peak region districts and Pikes Peak State College and scheduled after the springtime change when possible. Professional learning community days and teacher work days will be noted on the district calendar. PLC work days for staff will be scheduled as full work days rather than delayed start days for students. 5 days will be scheduled as PLC work days for teachers prior to first semester, and 3 days shall be scheduled prior to second semester. The school day for students shall end no later than the Friday before Memorial Day.
I'll just comment that the task force considered the discussions that they had, but also multiple discussions with staff over the course of about a year and a half, as well as multiple surveys that have been initiated with staff over the last couple of years. And so some of what you see in those consideration recommendations are memorializing some decisions that have been made recently, such as eliminating late start days for students.
Do you guys have any questions for us?
Short. I may have missed this on the earlier slide, so if I did, apologies in advance. How many parents were on this committee?
I can get you that list. There were several parents, but we have the names of all of the committee members. I also don't know what was mentioned. We had an initial group that met for a couple of years regarding the 4-day school week that we were considering, and then we initiated a randomized process to invite students, parents, and staff to join the committee this school year, but I don't have the number off the top of my head.
I know we had at least 2.
Oh, we had more than 2.
There were
2.
Yeah, we had several. Yeah, I can see their faces in my head, and I'm trying to count them.
Thank you.
Any other questions? What I found most interesting about this process was that most school districts in our area have a regulation that was the regulations that were listed, and we don't really have that. So that's such an improvement on our guide as a guidepost going forward. I think it'll make calendar decisions much easier, because we'll have a guidepost to go through, our staff will, as they're going through the calendar, and we as a board, seeing that guidepost, will know when we're voting yay or nay on what was taken into consideration when that calendar was formed. So I appreciate and applaud that work. And there is another meeting coming up this week, and I've already received some suggestions and thoughts from some parents, so looking forward to that. Any staff or board, any other thoughts? Questions? All right. Well, thank you both so much, and thank you for leaning in and all your work you're doing on the committee, amongst other committees.
Thank you.
Okay. Swetstein.
Okay, finally, for our committee update this morning, I'd like to invite Ms. Teresa Phillips, Ms. Nicole Urbachka, and Olivia Murphy up to talk about the ongoing work of our newly formed task force, our Arts Education Task Force. It should be the next slide, yes.
Good morning, board, and thank you for the very warm welcome earlier. I appreciate all of you. And there are some new faces here. I am Teresa Phillips, and I've been a community member since 2006. I'm a parent of 3 graduates of our school system, and have been a small business owner, and have run my own music studio for 16 years. So I come to you today with an update, actually an initial update on what we're calling the Arts Education Task Force. So the purpose today is to give you a summary of our meetings and our work thus far. Not really any action required other than to inform you, and obviously we'd welcome any ideas or questions. We, in terms of this task force, the origin of this conversation was born out of the last number of years as a parent and community member, and an advocate for the arts. that I was in an intersection of many conversations over the years with a recognition that in our community we have a school system that's high performing, that has historically supported the arts very, very well, that there has been some erosion of that support over the years for different reasons, and that we have a community who really wants to support art in our educational system. And so from all of those conversations, I began to have conversations with a couple of you and also with Dr. Summers. And for the last 2 years, I had talked to Dr. Summers about creating a space for this conversation so that we could have maybe some effective change. To that end, he graciously gave me permission to move ahead at the end of the fall. And so January was our first meeting, and Ms. Wedstein was very supportive of this and has been at every meeting that we've had. Before I move on, I don't want to overlook the other two wonderful people who are next to me. Can you take a minute and just introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Nicole Urbachka. Some of you may know me as Nicole Murphy. I was Nicole Murphy for a long time in the district. I came to the district in 1995 as an elementary music teacher. I stayed at Palmer Lake for 6 years and then had my own music studio out of the home when my kids were young. I returned at the middle school level where I taught drama, choir, dance, ukulele, speech and debate, you name it. And now I'm back at Palmer Lake Elementary, but currently in 5th grade. Next year I'll be doing 6th grade math and science.
Hi guys, I'm Olivia Murphy. I'm her daughter. I am part of Bare Necessity Theater Company at Palmer Ridge, and I am usually in a leadership position for the past 2 years. And I have been president, vice president, co-president, and I have also been a director at that theater company for a while.
And I'm really grateful both of you are here. The overall thought process is how best for our community to support arts education within the school system, and how best for that support to be reciprocated back to the community. I want to clarify for us here that when we talk about arts education, I think most of us, and I have my own personal bias as a violinist, but we consider the performing arts first: music, theater, poetry, dance. We also include the visual arts, the painting, sculpture, graphic arts, while also recognizing that all of these categories incorporate literary arts, industrial arts, digital art, and so forth. So when we say art, we mean all of that. So in our meetings, we have had 3 evening meetings that lasted at least 90 minutes each, some over that. We have had 59 people attend. We have included staff from all 5 elementary schools, the middle school, both high schools, many departments. I have individually reached out to people in departments that were underrepresented so that we can keep getting those additional ideas. We've been fortunate to have 10 students join our meetings, and we've had community members from Tri-Lake Center for the Arts, Palmer Lake Arts Council, parents of students, private studio teachers, retirees, number of musicians in our community, and just some general art enthusiasts have joined us. Oops. So our first meeting was on January 10th. It was kind of like, what is the status of D38 in our arts education? This is what we presented in short. This is very brief of what Ms. Wedstein presented that evening, but just to give people kind of a general orientation and a place to start in terms of some of the conversations. And you can review this on your own, but these are generally the offerings in D38 right now, K through 12. And in that meeting, we wanted to start from a values-oriented base, and we're working toward action items. So in the beginning, I think that evening we actually made it through 4, if not 5 questions, but the questions were along this type of line, which is obviously biased by how I think, but it's, start with no parameters, think big, and if D38 were the premier school district for arts education, what would that look like? And it generated a lot of great discussion. And we had actually a lot of fun that evening, I think. So I'm going to transfer, you have a microphone, to Mr. Botch.
So, like Ms. Phillips said, we started with values, not action items. Why do we value the arts, and why are the arts essential? They instill perseverance, creativity, leadership, vulnerability, collaboration, teamwork, and a growth mindset. Students experience multiple perspectives. For example, you can both be playing the same solo, the same flute solo, and you can have two different interpretations of them, and neither is wrong, and we can accept both. They receive and act upon feedback immediately. When you're in a rehearsal, the conductor stops you or the director stops you, gives you feedback, and you change it and you move forward immediately. Students take risks. It leads to students who are well-rounded, confident, and lifelong learners. It promotes academic learning as well as social-emotional learning, and our conversation, especially since COVID, keeps coming back to social-emotional learning and our valuing of social-emotional learning and our need for social-emotional learning and mental health in our schools. And the arts is such a natural way to promote this and teach these concepts. Being a premier district means instilling a love for the arts, celebrating our successes, and investing in programming at all levels. We've had celebrations in our district that actually most of our district is not aware of, just even recently. One that comes to mind is that the Bare Necessities Theater Company was nominated for several Bobby G Awards. The Bobby Gs are like the Tonys on a national level. This is a state level. I knew about it because I have a daughter in the theater company. It was not very well promoted or recognized. The arts expands our thinking about possibilities. We want to expand with community and private organizations. We want to develop magnet programs, seek grants, and utilize our local media. And actually, as we've reached out to local community, more and more our local community is reaching back to us. They want to be involved. They want to help arts grow in our schools. We know that we have many needs in the district, and we want to be equitable and share the wealth and share the growth with other programming. From there, we took a meeting in February and developed 5 main themes. One of those is just elevating the value of the arts. I'm going to tell you that when I came to this district in 1995, I heard throughout North Colorado Springs, I opted my kid into that district because they have such a tremendous arts program. I hear that less and less. In fact, what I hear is we live in District 38 and we go down to districts in the Springs because of their arts programs. We want to elevate peer mentoring and student leadership, and that's why Olivia is here. She'll talk about that some more. We want to talk about schedules and requirements for students. Sometimes the requirements and the schedules gets in the way of what students can take. I have an older daughter who her sophomore year audited jazz band. She skipped study hall every day to be the drummer in the high school jazz band. She did not get credit for that. We also want to talk about the 6th grade middle school model, and I know that's something that keeps coming up. But since we've implemented 6th grade at the elementary school, we have chipped away at arts for 6th graders. It started with choir, drama, and art being everyday classes for students. I was on a committee at the time where we were looking at offerings for electives in 6th grade. Only 10% of the entire 6th grade wanted choir as a class, for example. But if you looked at those numbers, 100% of the students who were in choir in 5th grade wanted to be in choir in 6th grade, and it was only offered that next year once a week after school. Since then, we've continued to chip away at our arts to include this year is our first year where we no longer have band in 6th grade. It now starts in 7th grade. That's an entire year of learning. We wouldn't do that for math. We wouldn't do that for reading, where we just take away a year of learning. We also want to talk about teacher responsibilities. For example, when we stay building to building, we're trying to offer, for example, a band teacher a full-time position, because we're not going to get a quality band teacher, let's be honest, for a half-time position or a 0.7 position. So we're building in study halls for those teachers to keep them full-time. But let's utilize their talent, their knowledge, their capabilities, and do some vertical alignment so that they're bumping down into middle school, into the elementary school, and supporting where their knowledge base is, using their talents. Sure. Yeah, perfect. We have some short-term and long-term goals that are very easy to implement and cost little to no money. Things like we have scholarship and signing events for our athletes. What about for our musicians? We have some musicians and artists that have gone to amazing schools. Having an arts fair for the elementary level. We used to have a district art show that's no longer with us. A National Arts Society recognition. We have students involved with this, and honor cords for graduates in the arts who have excelled in the arts. Our long-term goals are to have a fine arts graduation requirement, where every student in high school, if high school, and we want Renaissance men, Renaissance learners, so it's about exposing our students to all types of learning. We have a technology requirement. We need an arts requirement as well. And we want to form an arts council that includes community, teachers, parents, and students from each school. And our student voice is so important. We need to keep asking them and going to them. And I think we saw that with Dr. Frampton's presentation about mental health. The student voice is the most powerful voice in the room.
All right, hi folks. With Bare Necessity Theater Company, the past 2 years, our goal has been to outreach to the community, whether that's through theater or through their needs and helping them. And then this past year, the goal has been to take that community that we have gained and then draw them back to us so that we can help them some more or they can help us. One of the projects that we were doing was the Bare Necessity Theater Company went to Palmer Lake Elementary School and took a group of kids every day after school for a week and did an after-school kind of camp with them. And this camp was focused on everyday life skills like respect and communication and how those things applied to their everyday curriculums as well, whether that's school academics, friendships, or life at home. Except we taught this using different exercises in theater. That seemed like a really positive response, and the kids learned a lot from that, as well as the high schoolers. Recently, this week, we had some high schoolers do speeches, and all of them said that they want to continue reaching out to communities that don't have a lot of access to arts, so that they can continue growing that community and giving the arts to kids who don't have it so that they can continue to grow. So as a district, we have some short-term goals as well as long-term goals. Some of the short-term goals are to identify, oh, no, that's okay, are to identify the gaps in those middle schools and the elementary schools and figure out what's needed there so that the kids can grow, and as well as identify some communities and some high school students who are interested in those arts, as well as teaching them, because those are the kids who can reach out and create that community so that we can teach those middle schools and elementary schooler kids in those gaps. One of the ways we talked about doing that is expanding the FE program, which stands for Educational Field Experience. It's like student teaching at the high school level. I have done it, and it's a very positive program. However, it's not very accessible to the arts programs in the district. I did it for a science class, and that was already hard enough to get into, and that was at my school. It needs to be better advertised and better communicated through teachers and to students so that we can all know what that is, because not even the teacher that I student taught for knew what was happening. So it's just a program that needs to be understood more and advertised more so that we can offer that at the arts programs as well. And then, like I was talking about before, we could also develop some after-school camps or summer camps for K through 12. This will affect their academics directly, as well as their social lives and social emotional learning. Arts will directly affect that, but that needs to happen at a young age. And then we could also start to bring in those community members, which is what Bare Necessity has started to do. And if we're all able to do that, then it will affect the district entirely. And then moving on to long-term. Like I said before, we need to start young at an early age. And high schoolers are going to be more relatable to those younger students. So if we are constantly chipping back at those 6th grade levels, like she said before, one of the ways that you could support that and create better access to that is by using these high schoolers who want to continue in the arts and who want to teach in the arts. We are a community that are trying to reach out to you so that we can support you. And we're just asking that you guys allow us to come into the community and support you guys and support the students at a young age. And then also support, providing some more information about the arts programs across the district so that students understand that more, just like I said about the FE program. And then another way is to invest in an arts pathway for Career Start, which is a program that a lot of high schoolers go through just to get an early jump. However, there is no arts pathway yet with Career Start.
And again, we're going, we had those 5 prioritized buckets, and so that's what we're doing for, these are the action items from each of those broken into short-term and long-term. So,
Yeah. Do you want to move the next slide?
this one or next?
I think the next one. Oh, okay.
Can I pause you guys for just a minute?
Absolutely.
I just want to make sure we're doing a time check. Because we are at 10:38. If there's anybody that needs to leave at 11 for meetings, just feel free to go ahead and take off. But I want to make sure for our board, can we extend to 11:15?
No problem.
That work? You have a commitment at 11:30?
Ish.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure we've got one more presentation that's going to take about 40 minutes. Okay, continue. Sorry.
Thank you. We'll just be a few more minutes.
Short term, just accepting that uneven distribution of students in art classes as an accepted norm. For example, a band program, it's not unusual to have 50, 60 students in a class, as opposed to capping off at 30 students in a math class or a language arts class. So we accept that, but we don't accept a smaller class of 10 to 15 students in a theater class, or a perfect example, Olivia's been wanting to take Shakespeare in high school, and it always gets canceled because there are 10 to 12 students instead of the required 15. Also allowing students to not take study hall, especially if it conflicts with a rehearsal or a class that's being offered. Long term, the frequency of art instruction matters for students. More is better. So provide more instruction for arts for elementary students. Allow students to audit art classes when appropriate. And return to a traditional 7-period daily schedule for high school, because that does allow for more flexibility.
And I would add, these are the ideations on action items from the group. These are not recommendations. I just wanted to clarify that because I know that some things are coming up that might be even startling at times. So action with regard to the 6th grade middle school model, some of the ideas talked about were in the short term, you know, again, protecting that 6th grade arts time that's been eroded just a little bit over the years. Consider more specific course titles, requiring 7th graders have modified class requirements requiring a 1 semester of arts. And again, some of these overlap with some of the things you've seen on some of the other slides. There was quite a long discussion on vertical staffing, allowing our qualified staff to teach in a vertical fashion such that they're teaching within their qualifications at middle school and high school, so that they might be moving from place to place, but that yet they are teaching what they are skilled at, as opposed to, for instance, being assigned to study hall or whatnot. And then reducing confusion over courses. Apparently in some of the directories or course offerings, there's some discrepancies and whatnot. Long-term diving into the middle school model, which obviously is a very large large chunk to take off and a large conversation, and it's also been an ongoing conversation, honestly, since at least the last 8 years, to my knowledge. So that would include redistricting, but with the goal of ultimately providing consistent art time K through 8 across all buildings. And then teacher responsibilities. In the short term, again, you see that protecting 6th grade art time coming up, course titles, reducing confusion. Oops, this is the same slide, sorry. Is that the same? Oh,
I think we got the,
oh.
well,
Take it back.
teacher responsibilities, like we were talking about, teachers are being spread too thin and being pushed into areas that are not their expertise. So keeping them into their expertise and doing that vertical alignment. But also something that I've experienced coming back to the elementary level and moving into the classroom, and we're going to go back to that student mental health again. If I recognize that we've been pushing forward in our reading and our math and our science and our social studies, and we need an hour to just do a little craft together, I've just been so discouraged, and I have felt in trouble for doing that. I don't do it once a week. I do it maybe once a month or once every 6 weeks, just to take that break. And when we're alongside each other, cutting things out and gluing things down and creating, we're also having these beautiful conversations. So just allowing leadership to support teachers in those roles, in those creative times, in those little brain breaks, I think is important too. And part of the teacher responsibilities that we need to value teachers recognizing what kids are needing.
So all of this to say that our group is ongoing. We are continuing to work, and our next meeting is scheduled for May 21st, and we will be honing down actionable items that can be addressed over the summer, some of which is very low-hanging fruit and does not cost anything. Those will be the first things that we try to implement, and then if possible and if amenable to the board, I would love to be able to have our group come back in the fall with a report out on the actionable items we have done and give you basically a results report out. So, as I know, I look at Mr. Schwartz because I know he's wanting to know the measurable results. There will be
What would give you
qualitative
that
and quantitative
indication?
results. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
May I ask a quick question?
Of course.
So I think it's slide 41 or so. A couple of us had a question around the demand side of this. Has there been any discussion around what the demand is from the community and the students for things? Like you talked about classes that had a demand, for example, of 12 instead of 15 students, so it was right under the line. Is there significant demand, or have we thought about understanding that in areas that we don't offer that could be a big win?
I think the answer is yes, and there are complications. The first one that comes to mind has to do with music and band. And Ms. Wetstein, feel free to pipe in here if you have additions. But there's been a lot of talk about that in particular. There are, and I want to recognize there are complexities that when we have action items or ideas that have come out of the group, they can seem simple, but there are complexities within scheduling and within building FTEs and whatnot that make it much more complicated than a lot of people might realize. That being said, I think that the history of excellence that the school district has here with regard to band and music is significant, and there is conversation around how best to provide jazz band, how best to provide honor choirs, that by their very nature, those ensembles require fewer numbers. And so in a public school setting, that can be a difficult balance and dynamic to balance both with staffing and with student numbers. You also need students to be, for certain ensembles, at a certain skill level to be able to perform in an ensemble like that. So there's, I think you could get a small subset of people together and probably have a 3-hour conversation over some of this. I think that there is also great, there are some strides to be made with administrative input as to how best to balance numbers. And really, a lot of the conversation, one of the reasons we are in front of you as a board, come down to budget. And I think that the arts in general are you know, and with an unlimited budget, we could provide the music and art options that every child wants. In reality, there's a balance.
Thanks.
Yep. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments? Thank you so much. Thank you for putting so much work into this, and we do look forward to, I know you've still got work to do, and we look forward to seeing some final recommendations from that work too. And I think we do as a district want to make sure we're supporting and leaning into all of our students. And congratulations on Bare Necessities Productions.
Great job. Thank you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. And you forgot to mention you were also a previous board member.
Oh, yeah. Well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, we are moving on to our final item.
Actually, we have just a couple other quick updates.
Oh,
as far
okay,
as
that's right.
committee work goes, and these will be very brief. First, Mr. Ridgway, do you want to speak briefly about the work of the Staff Collaboration Committee?
In the intertime, I'll just say that it's going well, and we've had 11 meetings in the last 2 years, and it's one of the favorite things I do in the district. So.
Excellent.
Okay, and then just a quick preview that our Parent and Community Advisory Committee, along with the Financial Transparency Committee, will be presenting to the board on May 20th, and that group will also be engaging in a charter school application review that we recently received, and so that work will begin soon and carry on throughout the summer months. So we'll be giving you more information on that to come.
And I believe we have that application for review right now.
We are in the process of looking at completeness, and so the review has not yet begun. Yes, but we will be beginning that shortly.
Okay. Thank you so much. And now that we will be moving on to our next item and final item, which is...
Actually, can you do the other attachment first? You can leave that one up so we can toggle to it. That would be great. Okay, and finally, our priority 2 and 4 update this morning. We are very excited to welcome our very own Jessica McAllister, who is our secondary programs coordinator, along with special guest Dr. Tatiana Bailey and Gabrielle Glassford from Data Driven Economic Strategies. We're going to be discussing next steps for the board priority around innovation and career and technical education pathways. So I'm going to hand it over to Ms. McAllister to get started.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me today. It's good to see everybody. We're just going to look at a slide right now that was drafted quite a while ago, I think, by Ms. Wetstein, that just kind of outlined a timeline that we've been walking through, not only this year, but also into the past. So You can see that we have already successfully launched the D38 Enterprise. It's next door. You're welcome to come visit anytime. We did a tour of the CTE programming at our district that we're currently offering. We spent quite a bit of time at each of our secondary sites, which was really wonderful. And then there has been a constant pursuit of facility opportunities for high-tech career education that we've been looking at. And now we're kind of getting into the details and the weeds of how that might look. So this is that timeline just expressed in a little bit of a different fashion. I know it's hard to read up on the screen, but you'll see not only have we begun this year, the very first thing I just mentioned was the launch of the D38 Enterprise, but even before that, there have been several discussions and several visits that we've gone on to other CTE facilities around the state. So we are where the red arrow is, which is really welcoming in Dr. Bailey and then also Gabrielle. So in just a minute, I think I'm going to turn it, oh, no, before I do that, just really highlighting the CTE tour that we went on. So we're continuing excellent programming in each of our schools. You'll see some different pictures up above. We've had site visits from industry corporations. We're continuing with the house build. We've had some great successes in our CTSOs, specifically DECA. We've continued with just great programming all around. So I'm not sure if the time today lends itself to actually discuss and reflect on that visit, but if there were, no, I guess would be a time to do so.
Were there any board members who wanted to share learning from the CTE tour that we did recently?
Ms. Schenk.
Dr. Schenk.
Dr. Schenk.
It was an incredible experience for me. I saw such engagement of teachers and students together that you don't often see. This is real life, and it was just eye-opening to me. I didn't know until recently that some of this was going on. And research is really clear that a lot of students are saying, college, I don't know. I don't know that the investment's worth it. So our kids want real job skills. And the job market wants real job skills. So it's good they're on the same page, and I'm really glad we're going down this path. So thanks. This is pretty exciting.
Mr. Brown or Mr. Schwartz, would you like to share any reflections?
I just thought we had some really great programs, and it's an area I have a lot of interest in, so I'm definitely interested in expanding the CTE program. So I think it was great to see some of these kids that are super engaged. I was really impressed with the Palmer Ridge, the printing group. I mean, they had great set of kids in there that really knew what their business was. So I was really impressed with all that, and happy to see it expanded.
I've been an advocate of this for 5 years, so there's not a lot I can say to add to that except that there's a wonderful foundation for us to build upon. Our job is to do it and expand it and to keep up with our peers and competitors who've already done it. And the marketplace is asking for us to do it. And we live in an environment where our families are very, very interested in doing it. For the last 4 years, I've been surveying every community member I can in every session, and we have incredible unanimity with glaring yeses to move forward and grow this program.
And I would also concur that what we're seeing is a lot of these programs they lead to either college or career, because these programs, a lot of these students are able to use these as springboards and leverage themselves into better opportunities in college and also in career. And to the point that was just made in the presentation regarding our arts program, we're losing students who are going to other districts where they're seeking other opportunities. So if we want to keep up and if we want to make sure that we are serving our students best, then we need to make sure that we are able to step up.
Mr. Ridgway, would you open the other slide deck for Dr. Bailey, please?
And while he's doing so, I'll just take a moment to remind us that when we have CTE programming, it needs to be in alignment with local, regional economic data. And so we pay really close attention to programming that is going to be high skill, high wage, and high demand. And so I get to work with CTE directors all around the region, all around the state. And I've been lucky enough to listen to some presentations from Dr. Bailey before. She not only is the executive director of Data-Driven Economic Strategies, but she's also the author of an economic workforce and progress report that comes out every month. She's a resident of Monument. And you may have seen her on Fox 31 News, as she presents often on there as well. And we also have Gabrielle Glassford. She's the Associate Director of Workforce Development. And she is a CU grad with a political science major and a Pine Creek alumni. So we're just really excited to hear from them today and learn from them and consider partnership into the future.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it. As an economist, I'm going to economize on time, since I know that this is almost the end, well, I guess the end of your time period. But I think, you gave me a perfect segue with what you were just commenting on in terms of new ideas, shifting paradigms in education and so forth. So as a data-driven person, I'm going to just quickly go through the stack that I've done for several different organizations now, and I think it just kind of speaks for itself in terms of the needs and how quickly they have shifted. So here, I think we all know that job openings, if you listen to the news, you know that they're coming down. But if you look at the trend line, that bump that we had after the pandemic, we're just kind of back to normal. That's 8.5 million job openings, and it still translates to about an eighth 0.8 of a person for each job opening in the United States. So there's still a critical labor shortage. And even if you say that 0.8, that's assuming that each and every person is qualified for the jobs that are open, which, as we know, is part of the issue, is that we're not really training people for the jobs of today. And then you can see that the job openings are still about 43% higher than they were in March of 2020. So still quite elevated. Here you can see the unemployment rates reflect that. They're incredibly low. Economists say that the natural rate of unemployment is somewhere between 4% and 4.5%. And in El Paso County, we're currently at 4%, and you can see Colorado is a little bit lower than that. And most economists are forecasting, just based on the numbers, in terms of the number of working age people, that we're not going to hit anything close to like great recessionary levels, even if we did hit another recession in terms of unemployment. In other words, if we get up to 4.5%, that's probably about as bad as it's going to get, even up to 5%, and that's historically very, very low. And then, here you can see that the civilian participation rate, which is the red line, is low in the United States. This is the proportion of working age people who are participating in the labor force. And, a lot of people say, well, that's because of our aging population. And that is true. However, we also have a lot of working age people who are not participating in the labor force. Some of that is how expensive it's become to get post-secondary training. A lot of it is also the sort of trade-off between the jobs that are out there and what aspirations are as well. So here you can see that unemployment rate that we have now of 3.9% translates to 6.5 million unemployed people and 5.6 who are not actively participating in the labor force, but who say they want a job. And a lot of it has to do with skills. A lot of the long-term unemployed, when you do surveys, the Bureau of Labor Statistics does surveys, they say, well, I actually really would like to work, but I've kind of given up because I don't have the skill set for the type of job that kind of makes it worth it for me to work. And that's especially true for women and for young white men, is actually what a lot of the data is showing right now. So if you add those 2 million, 6.5 million and 5.6 million, that's about 12.5 million people in the United States who were underutilizing in terms of labor. And of course, that plays into global competitiveness quite a bit. And then, years ago, I was kind of curious, having lived in Canada and in the UK, how does our labor participation rate compare to other developed countries? And you can see in the top graph, we're well below Germany, Canada, the UK, and Australia. And, if you look at some of these other developed countries, they never got rid of the trades. They still do a lot with skill-based learning and hiring, and that's part of the equation for sure. And then if you look at the bottom graph, you can see that we're not really forecasted to improve in terms of labor participation, and that's a lot of the problem, because gray bars take us out to 2032, so about 8 years from now, and you can see that it's actually either the same labor participation rate or a little bit lower. So for instance, for 20 to 24, it's lower, and that's not because college attendance is increasing, but then if you also look at 25 to 54, it's about the same as it is today. So that tells me a couple of things. We're going to have long-term wage inflation because we're going to continue to have a labor shortage, but it also tells me it's going to be difficult for us to continue to compete on the global arena when other countries are capitalizing on their working age population more so. And, of course, we do have the reality of an aging demographic, and that's working against us as well. This is also true for El Paso County. We also have projections between now and 2030, and you can see that the proportion of working age people who are going to be participating in the labor force is actually a bit lower. And that's another problem, and I have to say I applaud people like Jess and Mark Belter when he was still here, and some of the other school districts that we are working with, mostly locally, but increasingly outside of Colorado Springs. The ones that are stepping forward and saying, we want to affect change here. We recognize we're listening to parents, we're listening to students and the community at large, and employers. And they're stepping out and they're saying we need to do something a little differently. We need to build an innovation campus. There are all kinds of different approaches that I think can help ameliorate this problem. Labor force participation by state, again, for prime working ages. We used to be one of the dark blue states, and part of that is that Colorado is now aging a bit more so. We used to be a disproportionately young state. We're still younger than the average, but because 20 and 30-year-olds moved here 20, 30 years ago, they're all now aging in to retirement ages. And then the labor participation rate by county, you can see here as well. El Paso County is a little bit lower than Colorado, but a little bit higher than the US. So room for improvement, but not quite as low as some other pockets of the United States. The male labor participation rate is interesting. If you look at the US, 82%, Colorado almost 86%, and El Paso County 76%. And then this is I've written a lot about this and dedicated several of the Fox 21 segments on this because this is really fascinating and it resonates. So the bottom right graph, if you look at the text box, in 1950, 1 in 50 men of prime working age, 25 to 54, were not participating in the labor force. 1 in 50. Today it's 1 in 9. And if you look at the top left graph, it shows men's labor participation rate ages 16 plus from 2008 to 2023. And we don't have time today, but if you could go back and you could look at the reason decline in manufacturing jobs, how expensive college is, shifting norms. There was war on incarceration in the 1990s, very difficult for some of those men to re-enter into the workforce and so forth. And then here is the employment to population ratio for the US and El Paso County. I will say that I do think that part of what's going on here is that we have a lot of retired military. It doesn't completely explain it, but I think there's definitely some mitigation going on here, because if you think about the quote retired people in their 40s, who retire from the military, they have pensions and they can usually work less, and have different work arrangements, if you will, or simply retire early. And then here you have the increase in labor force participation in El Paso County. The heartening thing here is that you can see that it really leveled out despite the fact that El Paso County has twice the population growth rate of the United States. It was very flat up until about 2014, and then it started to improve. So we are seeing some good improvements now, locally. And Mayor Suthers and I always joke that it was in 2014 that he became mayor and I moved here. So, we like to take credit for that, but of course, has nothing to do with that. Well, maybe Mayor Suthers. Now, some of the labor force data that we provide, and we do this not only for K-12, but we also do it for community colleges across the state. This is really, it's a huge database called Lightcast that we have in partnership with the state and with Pikes Peak Workforce Center that shows the top demanded occupations. And you can do this by city, you can do it by smaller geographic regions, census tracts, and then of course you can do it for the state and United States. And here, this is just occupations, and there's a lot of detail here. This is for the entire state. But here you can see there are some common themes like healthcare, software development, TL, which is trade, distribution, and logistics. That includes Amazon jobs and so forth, hospitality. But there certainly is a broad range of skills here. These are the certifications in greatest demand. Pikes Peak State College, the president, Lance Bolton, is a good friend, and he's a board member of ours. And he actively uses this data, as does Community College of Aurora, Trinidad State College, Pueblo Community College, to help hone their programming. In other words, look at what are they providing, and does it or does it not align with the skill sets that employers are asking for. This is all job posting information. And again, some of these themes are healthcare certifications, no great surprise, security-related certifications, again, TDL, project management, a lot in IT, social work, and so forth. And then these are the employers, so we could do a data poll, for this area, or for, I think you also said up into South Denver would be of interest as well, in terms of what are the largest employers in the area and how many job postings do they have? What are the greatest soft skills that employers are asking for? Interesting how we're kind of going full circle on that and saying technology can do a lot for us, but we need individuals who know how to communicate that data, how to problem solve, and so forth. And then this one's really interesting, software skills in greatest demand. When I pulled this during the pandemic locally, Microsoft Excel, Word, PowerPoint, it's really interesting, and that's my little joke that, I tried to get my kids to learn Excel, and they were like, no, it's Google Forms. No, it's Excel still. We still want to, focus on some of these core competencies. Software development, very teachable in high schools. One of the first things that we did when we started working with Whitefield School District is provide this information for their catchment area. And Python came up a lot, and they already had some software teaching that was being taught in their schools, and they have a gentleman named Nat who's very active and very knowledgeable in this, and he said Python is something that is teachable in high schools. You try to teach C++ as an example, and it's too esoteric. And that is also supposedly, Python is like a base for AI as well. So using this information to inform some of those decisions that are incredibly important. And then here you can see what economists call a barbell economy. We can also do this data poll looking at educational attainment that's required. And you have really two major categories. High school or vocational training and bachelor's degree are where most of the job postings are. And the bottom right is just a snap in time of 2017 to just 2021, a few years later, showing the proportion of jobs that are not requiring a bachelor's degree is actually increasing. Now, it doesn't mean we don't want to train kids, but it tells you something about the type of training that's needed and the investment that families need to make. And then this one, that report, there are just a couple copies that we put out there. We have information in a table form in terms of top occupations that are demanded locally, but this here shows also the salaries, because all of this information we can also give the median salaries. And guess what? The high demand occupations often have livable wages because they're high demand, right? So it's something, two birds with one stone, if you will.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can you explain, I think I understand, but just in case, the blue bars versus the orange dots?
Yes. So the blue bars show you the number of unique postings. So of course, registered nurses is way up there. And then orange dots show you on the right-hand axis the associated median market salary. Okay. But then I think it's also really important to look at not just what the postings are today, but what the projections are in terms of the jobs of tomorrow. So these are the fastest growing occupations between 2022 and 2032, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And this is rate of growth. So for instance, wind turbine technicians, a lot with alternative energy, certainly a lot still with software development and so forth. And then, of course, the salaries there as well. And the QR codes, I love that the BLS is doing this now. You know, kids could even just go in and scan and get detailed information. Not only this, but also what type of training do you need? And so forth. And those are going to be key components that kids and families need to make decisions as well. And then this is the same chart, but this is by number. So this isn't rate of change, this is number of new positions. And again, a lot in healthcare, a lot in statistics, and so forth. And then lastly, I just, to address your point about student loans and is it worthwhile? I mean, I'm always going to be an advocate as someone with a lot of graduate work for higher education. We're always going to need that. But the reality is that it's incredibly expensive. We now have over 1.7 trillion in debt, in student debt in the United States, with about 43 million borrowers. That now surpasses credit card debt, and it's only second to mortgage debt, and it's tripled since just 2007. 37,000 is the average student loan, but it's significantly higher, for instance, for Black borrowers at 52,000. The thing that really is striking is that we only have about a 64% graduation rate by the 6th year. Now, if you incorporate some of the private colleges that are not doing as well in terms of graduation rates, that actually gets pulled down to 50%. So you have this terrible scenario of kids that are starting college, getting some debt, but they don't have a degree. So to me, that says that we also need a lot more attention to some of the other pathways. You really want to be able to do both, right? And then lastly, this is just showing that student loans represent the highest increase in total household debt if we go back to 2003. Of course, the steep increase is the student loan amount that's increased 533%. Since 2003. So with that in mind, it's not surprising that enrollments have come down despite the fact that population has come up. So our population has increased 6.5% in the US since 2000, but college enrollment has declined 10%. So we don't want to leave that gap out there. We don't want to just say, okay, college isn't for everyone. We want to make sure we're filling it on the other side with some of these critical job openings that employers are saying are increasingly difficult to fill. So with that, I'll just step back and say that the one meeting that I have had, well, a couple meetings now, I guess, including the virtual one, we've talked a little bit about how D38 might use some of this information, and I can go into that detail if you'd like me to, but we've talked about potentially doing a literature search on innovation campuses. Gabby, who, by the way, this is my daughter, full disclosure, so this is your second mother-daughter duo up here. But I wanted someone young on our team to give us perspective on this. She's been up to Cherry Creek Innovation Center. We were just part of a team that was awarded an Opportunity Now grant in the southern part of the state, using this information to help inform some of the workforce development that they're doing in rural areas. So really briefly, we talked about extracting and sharing this local detailed labor market data. And that would be mostly to inform CTE programming and sort of help audit what you have out there. And that's very similar to what we've done with other school districts. Secondly, we talked about a literature search and a synthesis of best practices for the innovation centers around the country, looking at that and seeing really what the niche is for D38. Also creating a survey for students, parents, and the community so they can react to some of these choices that the data is showing us. We talked about it and we said we don't want to just leave it wide open because then you get all these different ideas all over the place. Make it data informed and give the community something to react to. And then also a synthesis of the labor force data and the survey results to the board and to the community. And then lastly, recommendations and an action plan based on this scope of work. So that's really a synthesis of what our discussions have been, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
This is really fascinating and fantastic information. I'm sure that we have thoughts or questions.
I'm super excited because of my own background, and I'm super excited to be involved in going forward and making our students' education more applicable to their futures. It's good for us too, by the way.
Anyone else? I mean, that's, yeah, 100%.
Couldn't be more excited.
Sometimes I find I have a lot of economics and people say I can't respond to economics. It's too esoteric for me. But certainly any questions you have, either now or that can be forwarded to me, I'm happy to answer, and then we can look forward to further discussions as well if there's anything else.
I'm guessing that we're going to have you back probably more because there's so much to dive into. This is really good driving information, and what are our next steps, and how can we as a district set ourselves apart from our competition, and what are the demands of how we can best serve our students.
Well, one thing I would say is I was told that there is potentially space already for an innovation center that might be out there sometime in the future that would enable you to move forward with something like this. Just this morning, I wrote a proposal for a separate project that is somewhat similar, and having all of those data points in place as the foundation for what you want to do next, because I agree with you. It's thankfully now moving pretty quickly, that a lot of school districts are recognizing that they need to have this in order to keep their student population and adequately prepare them.
So in alignment with the board's goals and timeline, our intent would be to continue to partner with Dr. Bailey to help us create some of those interest surveys for our students and families as we're moving forward with examining our approach to innovation in District 38. And I think we can pull back the other presentation to continue the discussion regarding opportunities for facilities, unless you want to say anything else, Ms. McAllister, before we move on.
Nope. Thank you so much for being here. It's been great information. I'm excited.
Absolutely.
Let's see. Yes. Thank you both. Thank you, Dr. Bailey, for your presentation. This was, there's a lot to glean from this. And I'm also thrilled that you're one of our own residents, too.
Yeah, we moved here just before the pandemic and for the views, but to work with the school district would be a bonus as well. Happy to do so.
Thank you so very much, and very thorough. When you said talk about time, I think you covered a lot.
Okay, good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, continuing on with this conversation.
So just to bring some of the things that we've talked about before, kind of bring all this together in parallel in terms of facility. I wanted to kind of level set us on where we're at and the whys in terms of looking at additional space. And so these bullet points are kind of key foundational things in terms of the conversations we need to have amongst ourselves, with the staff, and with the community, I think in particular. And so I wanted to highlight kind of this first bullet point where we've had a lot of conversation about what to do with Grace Best, and the benefit of pursuing Senate Bill 2417 like we did gives us the opportunity to decouple those conversations and not to put the Grace Best conversation down or to the side, but we pursue it separately and intentionally for different purposes. And so with Melissa Andrews now on board here, she is pursuing the work that I'm referencing at the end of that first bullet point in terms of title work, survey work, environmental work, so that we can pursue that conversation again separately for its own purposes. As terms of the freed up captive fund balance that Senate Bill 2417 then gives us in terms of opportunity, it's tailor-made for an investment in a separate and specifically designed CT facility. And I use that word investment intentionally because pursuing a facility this way has great downside protection for us, versus if we're just to add on to an existing school facility. Once you do that, once you build a school or you add on to a school, that's a sunk cost. When we take something like this and we look for a manufacturing facility, it has its own value separate from education. And we can invest in it and we can do things and do a lot of good things with it. But in your worst case scenario, it still has its value that we could then remarket that someday if we really wanted to. But I don't think we would need to, but it is, again, a different type of investment to capital purpose than what we have in regular buildings. Just, I know all the board members have seen the facility, so this is just some more specifics for those that may not have seen it yet. And what the timing of this really comes alongside with what we're talking about really well, because the property's not going to be available until January in terms of taking possession for us. That gives us good time, I think, particularly of course through the course of the summer, to be having these conversations with experts like Dr. Bailey, with experts like an architecture firm, to really help us put together a plan so that when the time came, assuming that we pursued this in that timeline, we'd be really ready to step in July and start with start with a build-out plan, so that by the time we hit the fall of 25, then we have this facility. We are able to bring kids into it and do good things along these paths that will benefit the students. Questions or thoughts on that?
I did have one statement I wanted to, you touched on it, and I think it's important to retouch on it, that with Senate Bill 2417, those are one-time dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So those are not dollars that can be a reoccurring investment into something else in our district. They are one-time dollars that are only available this coming up school year.
Well, only available until we spend them.
Yeah, but I mean, it'll come
Yeah.
available this coming up school year.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure that, I can't emphasize that enough, because I think one of the things we need to make sure we're doing as we're moving forward is doing this with our community and our parents and students and staff alongside. So having those community conversations is important, and I think that's going to be a question that gets brought up during those conversations.
Yeah, and so in this bottom bullet point on this slide, made emphasis on that as a one-time source of funds, but it's still a relatively significant amount. Can we build a building with it? No.
Right.
An elementary school costs $30 million. We're talking $8 million. That's something we can do something good with. So, in terms of should we spend it on various capital needs around district, we could, but it also is the unique opportunity that here is a piece of funding, a source of revenue that can be made something impactful made. And when we're not at a place where we have huge glaring issues facility-wise, we have that opportunity. One thing that I kind of glossed over here that I also want to, strategy is my number one strength on StrengthsFinder, and so I want to always have us be in the best position, keep as many options open for as long as we can. So I really would like to do this with pursuing of some financing, so that we keep all of our options open as long as possible, especially to focus on the build out. And then after the build out's done, then say, okay, what do we have left? Should we just pay off the principal and the lease, or are there other things that we should be applying to that? So the longer that we can keep our options open, the more opportunities we can have to make good, strategic, informed decisions on what to actually do with that.
I'm going to take privilege. The other question I have, which I asked at the last board meeting, ensuring that this is sustainable, that the funding is for helps with that one-time purchase, but how do we ensure that we are being successful and that we have the resources, whether it's through funding through grants or through budget, that we are making sure that we are meeting the needs of our students and that we're fully staffed to do this. And I'm excited to see what's available and what is it that D38 can lean into and build for our students.
As we move to a student-based, student-centric budgeting and financial management strategy, we are already taking the first steps. We're already doing some of this work right now this year and planning for the 24-25 budget and identifying things, situations where we have inefficiencies or disproportionate spends, probably a better way to say it, not necessarily inefficiencies, but disproportionate spends that we can correct in order that will be ready again by the time that this comes online, that those funds can be properly allocated in a more balanced way, so that it will have its source of funding going forward from an operational perspective.
Mr. Schwartz, do you want to ask the legendary question? What does success look like?
No, I know what it looks like. It's like lots of kids learning lots of skills that would allow them to have choices when they graduate and not have them potentially not have a direction when they graduate and flounder. And it also looked like this being a magnet for families that want to put down their roots here and help us continue to flourish and grow our community. However, I do have a different question. First of all, most importantly, your question, President Upchurch, was valid. So did Mr. Ridgway satisfy it, or is there something else that you feel the board and or the community would need to see to have comfort with respect to ongoing OPEX for such a facility?
Well, I want to give room for what that looks like. I mean, I appreciate the confidence, but I think as we're discussing our budget going forward, coming into next month, I think that I'm assuming and expect to see that'll play out in hand-on visual ways.
So I just want to make sure that Mr. Ridgway heard that correctly. Does that mean that he should be preparing something in graphical format to show an evolutionary migration of funds based on student utilization?
I would think so. I think that's the question we get asked, is how are we making sure that, what is our long-term plan in how we address this?
So, Mr. Ridgway, is that acceptable to build some type of I know you're not into graphs financially, but bear with me on that. Or does Strength Funder...
There's 3 graphs in my presentation.
I'm worried about what Strength Funder said. But can you begin to build a model that shows this evolutionary migration of funds as the art of the and versus the or for the district?
I can.
So that when we have a lot of very fiscally minded community members, and it would be valuable for those that aren't in education every day to be able to see it and understand it graphically. I think that would help us enhance the absorption of the messaging.
Okay.
Does the rest of the board concur?
Absolutely.
Seeing nods.
May I ask my next question now?
Sure, of course.
So given the fact that there's a commercial structure for sale, and that there are very few manufacturing facilities within the confines of our school district's geographic borders, it's competitive. It doesn't mean that there are tons of people clamoring to buy it today, but it's a unique opportunity. And so with that comes some timeframes and some compelling events. Is it worth understanding what those are so that we don't get caught behind the 8 ball?
Of course.
Mr. Ridgway, would you be so kind as to at least verbally outline them, and if need be at our next session, we can certainly put them into some type of a graphical format?
So, to be more specific, what do you want me to do at the next meeting?
Are there some drop dead dates to do things and make commitments of funding and such that are important for us to understand in this process with the table structure?
Okay, so yeah, as we start at a target date and then walk backwards, we start as a target date of August of 25, wanting to be able to have students in a facility receiving education in CTE programming. Then what we need before then is the certificate of occupancy to actually be in place in that building probably by July of 25, and that means prior to that we have to have all the build out work done. So I'm continuing to walk backwards through then the spring of 25, and as I mentioned earlier, the building building wouldn't be available for possession until 12/31/24. So really that entire springtime would be necessary to be used for construction and the general contractor and subcontractors to be building that out. Walking backwards, getting closer to present day, then as we go into come back into fall of 2024, then we need to be putting our final plans together in terms of architecture, engineering and such. And to inform that, we need to have the first conversations about the programming and the design. And so that gets us into early fall and through the summer of this year right now. To really to kick off all of that process, what we need to do is get in contract on the facility itself. And that would be our next tangible step here, and then give us the go ahead that yes, we can pursue this work through the course of the summer and the fall to determine what programming design will be most appropriate, perhaps some phasing to it. But we do need to get under contract with the building so that we know we have a space, we know what the space is like, what it's shaped like, what its capacity and potential is, and then give us that opportunity to go through those phases that I outlined there, targeting then possession and a closing date somewhere around the end of the year, beginning of next year. So at the next meeting, that would be the time to consider the actual contract for acquiring that. And just like when you buy a home, then there'll be inspection periods and things like that we need to go through. But the good news is that we can do a lot of that concurrently while we are designing programming.
Now, we are discussing some conceptual designs drawn out. Is that something that we can do before we've gone through all the programming discussions, before we actually commit to buying the building?
So if we were to go into contract, we'd have a 90-day window for inspection, and that would give us both time to not only do the actual inspection and be confident in the condition of the facility, but then also give us that time to have the conversations and begin the conversation with the architect firm and start having drawings done that would not be specific to the level of construction, but would be conceptual enough to understand here's what is possible and what we would be proposing for that space. So the 90-day window, think the 90-day window would kind of go through the end of August, and that's why I do emphasize work that would need to be done in the summer here in terms of that, so that they would all kind of come together. Let's say here's the end of our inspection period. Here is where we believe we're at in terms of some good basic drawings, and give us confidence that yeah, we can pursue this next stage.
So that's a good summary. Thank you for walking us through that. Just so the board's clear, that at some juncture it requires fiscal commitments from us, right? And yes, that there will be a nice tranche of funds available effective July 1 that will fund all this, but at some juncture we still have to make the commitment as a team, right? Just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that in line with what you just said, the comfort level to do this, I'm feeling extremely appreciative and just want to say that we've got Mr. Ridgway and Jess and Tatiana, all people who can help us make this work well, extremely well. And without you, I don't know how we'd even figure this stuff out and whether we have the money and all that, it would just be impossible. So I'm feeling incredibly grateful that we've got these people who can do these things for our kids.
I'll also draw attention to Melissa Andrews because this summer work in terms of planning and getting architecture involved in things, she will be a very valuable resource in that, and especially with her experience of having done this several times before.
Fantastic.
Yep.
So I might just bring up the last slide here, and this is that timeline that I showed earlier. This is, the red arrow is pointing to this meeting right now, but after this meeting, then we do plan to re-engage with data-driven economic strategies to see about a further partnership that we can have with them to create that survey and disseminate it amongst our community and whoever we determine would be best to take that, just so that we're making really informed decisions about whatever potential programming we might be offering. Then, of course, once that survey is sent and collected, we'll analyze the data, start determining the programming, and then start with that building design conceptualization moving into the future. So that's the timeline that we're all sort of operating off of right now, but I just wanted to kind of highlight that here as well.
Okay, then we would plan to continue the discussion on the facility at the May 20th regular meeting.
And we can go, and when it's time for negotiation, we'll go into an executive session for that, for sure.
And then we typically skip 1 month in the summer, right?
July.
Okay, so we really have then 3 times we're together before that, at such time that we'll be in a position to make this commitment.
And being mindful of everyone's schedule, there is always opportunity to schedule a special meeting, and not that it has anything to do with this, but keeping in mind that Dr. Dattery will be starting with us on July 1st, and we were looking at a board retreat probably in August, once you have a chance to onboard and really get your feet wet and go forward with our strategy on that too. So we'll have, so Ron, to your question, yes, July is when we take off. At the same time, if we need more time, this is important enough. I've heard from all of our board members that this is important enough that we will find the way to make time, and if we have to have a special meeting in between there.
Absolutely.
I also think that an elevate and engagement with our community is also going to be very important in this process as well.
Right. And so that probably needs to happen post-haste.
Correct, I'd agree.
Just so that we don't get caught up with a deadline with tens of thousands of dollars hanging on it, right? Everybody appears body language comfortable with what we're embarking on here.
Mr. Norris, you good?
Okay.
Mr. Brown? Okay.
Cool.
Dr. Shank?
It's good stuff.
Okay.
It's exciting stuff.
Anything else for this conversation or topic before we adjourn? I know we are now 18 minutes over. No, 38 minutes over. Dr. Dattery.
I would just like to say just a quick thank you and gratitude for allowing me to join you today for the meeting. It has been very good information from the Safe and Healthy Schools report that you did, Mr. Frampton. Certainly all of the community updates of the different task forces that are meeting, and so I found that just very valuable as I'm just listening and learning. And then all of the work that you've already engaged in with the work around career and technical education, inviting Dr. Bailey to be joining us in this conversation, I think is going to be very important as we continue with the work that you're leading, Jess, and certainly I concur with
Mr. Ridgway and all of the work that he's done, and you as a board. It's just been a very good morning. Time well spent. Thank you for, I know it did go over, but it was very, very good and informative morning. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a good track record of finishing on time for our regular board meetings. Our work sessions, we tend to go over a bit, but.
You had the credit from regular board meetings of extra time.
Anything else for the good of the order before we let everyone get on with their day? No? Well, thank you so much. And don't forget, we got a lot of events and celebrations and excitement within the next 2 weeks, including some graduations and some continuations. Please, please pay attention to your calendars. Our staff and our schools and our students, the feedback is that they really, really do appreciate and want to see our presence. So just keep that in mind for the next 2 weeks. Be where you can be. And next time, our next board meeting is May 20th. We have graduation on 18th. So and 6th grade continuation on the 16th. And all week we're celebrating our staff. So I'm sure I will see everybody's smiling faces before our next board meeting. And with that, have a great day.